Yeah, everybody, I'm back. John Alite Show. Hit the subscribe button, follow. Check out Effin' Pizza down on Landis Avenue in Vineland. Great spot. Food's great. Pizza's great. I'm down there on a regular. Check it out. Great guys that run it. And I think you'll enjoy it if you're from down there or if you're passing through. Effin' Pizza. Great name, too. You got to love the name. Anyway, let's get into it. So we're going to talk about my cousin, Paty Adriano. I spoke about him years earlier, and I'm not talking about the son. The son was involved with me, was one of the guys involved in my case. I'm talking about his father. His father stayed with some serious tough guys back in the day. Johnny Centur, Bobby Mary, Paulie Gazzara, Cyril Peron was a captain in the Genovese family. These guys ran around for him, worked for him, strong arm for him. He owned the arena in Maspeth. We used to go to at the arena. Actually, I talked about that. We had an incident there with his nephew years ago. He was a powerful captain. And he had my cousin and some of these guys running around for him. Doing strong arm stuff, hurting guys from, collected money, ran a little bit with numbers, bookmaking. Years later, Johnny Centur moved down by me, so we used to drive back and forth together from Jersey. He lived near Princeton area. I lived in Plainsboro in those days. So we drive back and forth. He eventually gets straightened out. And my cousin and him, and they stayed there. They stayed at the White Horse at Frankie Scarpanito's place, was involved with me in the drug business years later. He owned the White Horse. He died too. He's dead. But these guys had big reputations. So I used to go by my cousin all the time. I like going by him. I was a kid. My father loved him, because he was a tough guy and streety guy. He loved being around my father. My father was always gambling. He liked to gamble. And, so when we went to family barbecues and picnics, he would be there. And he married my cousin Drita on the other side. And he ends up getting killed. And he gets killed by one of his best friends, another guy that stayed with him. And he was kind of like and I remember even back then, he was like, a gopher for my cousin, not a tough guy. He was dating a girl. I'll leave her name out of it. And she grew up with me. And my cousin had some problems. We did some things, and he called me up. I was a kid. He called me. I was a crazy bastard. I had my father's car in a body shop at the time. He calls me up. He goes, "Hey, can you get your father's car?" I said, "It's in a body shop." So I call the guy that has a body shop up his childhood friend. I says, "Give me the car. Can I drive it?" He goes, "Yeah," but it was like half painted. And I go, "Just give it to me. I got to do something." We took the plates off, and, he did a robbery. I drove. I couldn't even hardly drive back then. So, he goes, "Don't worry. I'm going to do this real quick." And he runs inside, and he robs a bar lounge. He comes back out, and that was just him. And they'd spend money like crazy. He'd go buy me a sweatsuit or whatever, and then he'd be on his way. So I used to go over to him all the time. He lived across the street from Carvel. And I went to see him, and he had problems. He was like laying low a little bit. And I went to see him in the daytime. He comes down, he's looking around, he's paranoid. So I don't know what he got into, but he got into something with the Genovese family and whatever he did for them. He wasn't worried about them. He was worried about whatever he did. Some guys were looking for him, and he was worried about the law. So he told me, "Listen, don't come around here for a little bit." He goes, "I got some serious problems." So I'm like, "Yeah." And I'd go by anyway, and he'd get mad at me, he'd yell at me. And, I'd ring the bell, he'd come get me, and he'd bring me up for 2 minutes. He goes, "Come on, you got to go, just in case they come." And he had guns around a lot because he was that paranoid. And so I didn't see him for about a week or two. And back in those days, there was only house phones. So, so I'd call his house phone, and he'd get mad at me. He goes, "Listen," and I'm like, why, I'm going to come by. He goes, "I keep telling you, don't come by." He said. So I'm like, all right, I don't want to hear it. I like being around him. And, he told me, all right, come by for a minute. And I'd go hang out with him and whatever. And then I'd leave and go back. And I'd try to get his advice on things. And different, you look up to him, you're a kid. And so one day I want to go over there. And he says, no, it's not a good time. And here's the story. So I know he has that problem, right? And I know guys are trying to kill him. And I know that he's done a lot of work. And Johnny Centur, these guys had, in those days, had a fierce reputation. And you're talking about the late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s, early 80s, very early 80s. So they were the guys that really were maneuvering and running and robbing and killing and shooting it up and banging it up and selling drugs. They were doing everything. And I want to go by his house. So I end up going by his house. There's police cars everywhere. I don't know what's going on. And the story is this. His friend, the one I'm telling you, the gopher, was dating a girl, and my cousin was hanging out with that girl. And my cousin was actually friends with her first. So the guy was jealous, and he rang the bell. And my cousin answered the door. And when he was walking back up the steps, when he got right to near his couch, his chair, there was a chair that when you come up the steps right to the right, the guy shot him in the face. So he was screaming, when he got shot in the face. And then after he shot him in the face, he shot him again in the head. And that was the end of, obviously he died. And the guy ran out of the apartment, panicked, ran out of the apartment. The girl ran out of the apartment screaming. She was screaming, hysterical. And the landlord of the house, later on, I go talk to him after the police and everybody had gone. And that's where I get the account of what happened. And then later on, I talk to the girl. And the guy ends up, now I go to the wake. Now, I don't know about that until after the wake, because I go to the wake a couple of days later. And I got to give him, he's a piece of shit, but he had the balls to come to that wake and pretend and cry like he was his good friend and he was crying and, behaving as if he really cared. Meanwhile, he's the one that did it. He's the one that killed him. And that'll just go to show you, because I always talk about different guys getting killed, friends of mine, because anybody could kill you, anybody could shoot you, anybody can beat you to the punch or catch you short, or you trust them and they lure you. So those are the things that go on in this life, right? And after the wake, he takes off and he leaves. I believe he went to Arizona. So he never gets pinched for this murder. A couple of days after that is when I went back to the landlord and got the version from the landlord of what happened. And, and also back then, nobody ever wanted to talk to the police. So I don't believe they even told the police the part they told me. I know for sure the girl never did. And then I went and had a conversation after the landlord talked to me. I went and talked to the girl who I know since we're kids. And she told me, what happened. And she was scared, obviously upset, scared, and was, to watch some of, people talk like it's a movie, but it ain't a movie. When they're getting shot in front of you and you see their brains being splattered and, when it happens that fast and the reality hits in, that's why you have all these keyboard people that talk like they seen something, did something, know something, or they understand the street. Well, they watched people like my cousin get killed and other people getting killed and friends of ours getting killed. And, our friend Mikey Merlo, I talk about him when he got his head blown off with a shotgun. They never seen that. This was normal to us because we seen it all the time, unfortunately. But that was the reality of our world that we lived in. But when this coward took off and he went to Arizona, I believe it was Arizona, he never got pinched for this. He never got caught for this. I don't know if he's still alive or not alive. I don't know where he is. But your life ends just like that. So he thought, and I thought when he first got killed, that it was maybe another mob family that hit him, or the guys that he had a problem with. Either he hurt, shot, killed, beat, robbed. I don't know what he did. He wouldn't tell me. He says better he didn't tell me. So I thought it was them initially. And then I found out it was his punk friend. And again, this is part of the life of the street. For nonsense, he died. For jealousy. It wasn't for the rest of it. And the rest of the guys over the years, his friends were jails and got killed or died naturally. Some of them, Johnny Centur, believe it or not, died naturally. And these are the guys that, we were raised around and watched and developed and started to want to be like them, copy them. You're impressed by them. And that's why I'm so aggressive when I'm doing these shows and I tell kids, and I try to keep, the stories are cool. They're interesting. I mean, unfortunately, I'm talking about my cousin in this one and other people are dying and the life was exciting, adrenaline. But everybody I talk about is getting killed, being betrayed, being snuck, broke, suffering, dying in jails. There is no happy ending. So every time I tell these stories and kids are listening to them, the message is always going to be the story, yeah, but the underlining message is get a job. Go the right way. Go live a good life. Because the pain of every one of these stories, if everybody's listening one story after another, and we can tell these every day, is nothing but suffering, misery, and murder. And you end up desolate, broke, and in prison if you're not dead. And the suffering of all the years of all that is nothing good. So, you could come back and, there's so many interesting stories I could go into with Johnny Centur and my cousin. Different robberies. When they went down, there was another situation when they went into Highland Park, down all the way down Jamaica Avenue. We used to go down there a lot. And back in those days, it was a lot of gangs. It was crazy homicides, and there was the Black Panthers, and it was, a lot of 7-9 group. But later on came a little more later than that. But there was other things like, gang affiliation stuff down there. But they end up going down to Highland Park, and a kid got robbed, and they jumped in the car chasing the guy. And they, this is broad daylight too. So, I'm down there, we're hanging out, we're playing baseball, I think, at the time. And they come flying down there with some old, caddy or Oldsmobile or something. And they jump out of the car like it was nobody around. And, start shooting, and they hit the guy in the back of the upper leg, lower back. And he went down, and, they just ran up to him and finished it like it was nothing. And there's kids everywhere. It's not like, and then they just jump back in the car. And as they're jumping back in the car, my cousin smiles and goes, "Hey, how you doing, Johnny?" Like it was not didn't miss a beat. And I'm a little kid, just looking at it, smiling, but it's not really, I don't know what the hell you're smiling at either. It's not funny, but you're looking at him as like the hero. Although, all right, the guy had it coming because of what he did, but he didn't have it coming to get killed. And that was the part where the misconnect, because you start believing he's supposed to get killed, just what I just said. And that's the problem with that life, because you start, you're thinking so warped that you develop yourself into that. So later on, you take things to that extreme because you think that's normal because that's how you grew up. That was normal. In reality, that's not normal. In reality, all the guys that we always talk about are dead. So when you're living in Iowa somewhere or Kansas City or, they can't believe that all these guys in these stories, to them, it's not possible. Like we talk about going up to the park, to the Dome in Forest Park, and I've talked about it over the shows over the years. If somebody was ever up there, they couldn't believe what went on up there. It was packed with drugs, with any kind of weapons, anything you want to do. Everybody just hung out all day. The police they couldn't do shit about it. It was just hundreds of people. They couldn't do it. They didn't have enough manpower to do it if they wanted to do it. There was no way to move them legally, especially back then. And, the park was, and Forest Park really is a beautiful park, but it was only used for one purpose by all of us. And as we got older, it was a haven of, our neighbor was called Woodhaven. We nicknamed it Death Haven, but it was a haven for drug dealing. The police couldn't get you if you wanted to, because there were so many places. If they rolled up one way, you just went out the other way. They rolled up 3 ways, you went out the 4th way. You had hills. We knew those parks inside and out, from the golf course to the dome, to the band shell, the carousel, to the, down in the hole, which was a baseball fields. We knew our every way in and out of there. Bicycles. They couldn't catch us, and you're fast, you're young. It was just a money. It was just to us, it was a money haven. It was just unbelievable ways to just continuously to make money, and they couldn't control us. Anyway, so when you're watching and then you're talking about my cousin or anybody else, it's always the same end up. They're dead. When I talk about, Billy Streamer, he's hogtied and he's left in a garbage can in Brooklyn. Unfortunately, when his father called the house at 4 a.m, that's what he was crying and telling my dad. When you talk about, Greg Ryder, and he was never found again. And he was chopped up somewhere by the amount of blood they found in the van. Then he was dismembered. This reality of all our friends, right, that stayed with us, family members. So when people talk about, think it's an exciting life, nah. It's just a terrible existence. And that's why I'm always talking about, and I do a lot of work and talks in these inner cities, because you're trying to save one of these lives, not to end up like the rest of them. Because there is no happy ending in there. Not world. That world, you're not getting one. Anyway, follow me. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, ask questions, and I'll see you next week. See ya. F and pizza follow. Go eat there. Take it easy, everybody.